Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be under the water? And what I mean by under is really the deepest point, the ocean's bottom. For some people, it's a really huge place, huge enough to be considered a terrifying place. But do you know what is really terrifying? It's when you go under it, because it tends to be even more massive. In fact, over 80% of the world's oceans are what people have yet to explore, observe, and discover. This simply implies that if you go down on a ship, you will most likely sink to a depth that no one has ever imagined. This must also explain the reason when boats and people sink, rescuers are unable to save them and they would end up missing. And in some situations, entire planes with hundreds of people on board that sink would simply disappear, unable to be found. Only a small portion of those people who sink down there would be able to manage to return back to land. So, we can say that managing to stay alive at the bottom of the ocean without anyone to help or equipment to breathe is really unimaginable. But now you have to imagine and believe that there is this Nigerian man whose name is Harrison Okene who has managed to stay alive, making him both the unluckiest and luckiest person who has ever lived. And this is his story. Okene was working as a cook on board the tugboat Jascon 4 in 2013. On the 26th of May, he was with the other staff late at night at around 32 kilometers from the coast of Nigeria in the Gulf of Guinea. At around 4:30 a.m., a very huge wave hit the Jascon 4 when they were attempting to work together to stabilize a Chevron oil tanker. This made the tugboat flip over and snapped their rope. The tugboat began to sink quickly, causing panic among the other 12 crew members on board. As a precaution against pirate raids, it was common practice to lock the crew in their cabins. Yes, being locked within a cabin works well against pirates who may threaten their lives. However, it does not work so well when your cabin is being flooded with water. But luckily, Okene was not in his cabin at the time. At the time before the ship flipped over, he had left his cabin and went to the bathroom, only wearing his underwear. When the wave hit, he was tossed around within the bathroom, but he managed to open the door before the room filled with water. He then witnessed as several of his colleagues were swept outside of the boat. Okene forced himself to get out of the bathroom and go into another. There, he managed to keep his head above water until the boat hit the ocean floor 30 meters below the surface. That's nearly the height of a 7-story building, or 20 Toyota Corolla Altis, stacked on top of each other. And even though he was freezing, he managed to climb his way out of the dangerous little bathroom that he was in. Underwater, Okene couldn't see anything and couldn't breathe. Because of that, he used his hands to navigate where to go until he miraculously discovered another larger air pocket in the engineer's office. He then stayed there, almost fully naked, and in that very cold, wet room, with a quickly decreasing supply of oxygen, with no food or fresh water, his chances of surviving were very low. He was stuck in a small pocket of air, about 1.2 meters high and 6 cubic meters in volume. And the reasons for his low chance of surviving are quite apparent. First, he may have died of dehydration. Second, he may have died from feeling too cold. Third, the water could have filled the area, drowning him. Fourth, the probability of him running out of air to breathe and getting suffocated is very high. And in the worst case, he may have been eaten alive by sharks who were already searching the damaged boat. The most intriguing part now is how he managed to avoid dying in that situation. To begin with, he prevented the chance of him getting dehydrated by drinking a few cans of Coke around him. Next, he placed the mattress he discovered underneath him. That mattress became very useful in keeping part of his chest and his entire head above the freezing water, allowing his core to remain warm and preventing hypothermia. It's worth noting that if it hadn't been because of the mattress, the extremely cold water would have already killed him. However, at this point, the biggest problem was that the oxygen in that tiny pocket of air where he was trapped was running out. More than that, the danger wasn't only from running out of oxygen to breathe, but also he could have possibly poisoned himself by exhaling too much carbon dioxide. So how was he able to get through it? Fortunately, water quickly absorbs carbon dioxide, and because he was splashing the water around the area, he unknowingly increased the water's surface area. That also increased the rate of carbon dioxide absorption. As a result, the chance of him getting poisoned never grew high enough. However, while trying to hang in that situation, he had to become used to the sounds of sharks breaking into the damaged boat and eating his colleagues' corpses. Luckily, the sharks never found him in the tiny pocket he was in. Okene had been trapped, his body half submerged, at the bottom of the ocean in a tiny pitch-black 6 cubic meter area, and he had to endure it for about 60 extremely torturous and terrifying hours. And while he was barely breathing the absolute limit of his limited oxygen supply, he finally heard the sound of knocking. It was probably within an hour or two of suffocating. Okene had no idea that the Chevron had dispatched a team of divers to inspect the damaged boat and recover any bodies. Chevron didn't expect the chance of one person managing to survive the tragedy. Hearing the sound, Okene began making a sound, banging on the walls around him with all his force and effort, but the divers sadly couldn't hear him. However, when he finally saw the light from a diver coming from the water nearby, he knew it was time for him to do something. He then grabbed the arm of the diver that had passed in his area. The diver, only expecting to find a corpse, was extremely shocked. However, if you think Okene was safe at that point, well, there were still dangers to be aware of. Because he'd been down in the water for so long, a quick return to the surface would have likely resulted in his cardiac arrest and maybe even his death. So what the divers did was equip him with a diving helmet and placed him in a diving bell before they lifted him up to the water's surface. He underwent 2 more days of decompression before he was finally able to return to his normal life after his near-death experience. Okene's terrifying experience underwater is regarded to be the longest time any human has ever managed to stay underwater without the use of any diving equipment. Okene now claims that he experiences nightmares after the incident, and because of that, he has vowed never to return to the ocean ever again. Yes, Okene, a Nigerian cook who has worked on a tugboat, has suffered from thalassophobia, a phobia from deep bodies of water, such as the ocean. What are your thoughts about this episode? Tell us all that in the comments section. If you enjoyed this, don't hesitate to hit the like button and hit that subscribe button if you want to be updated when we release new videos.